Imagine a city not just built from mud brick and palm groves, but one that was intentionally forged to be the intellectual capital for a whole new civilization. In the 7th century, this wasn't some kind of pipe dream. It was a real, deliberate, strategic project. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to explore just how Medina was transformed into a global center of learning that would literally shape the world for centuries to come.
And the results? Well, they were immediate and honestly profound. This quote you're seeing isn't just high praise. It's a statement of fact from the people who saw it happen. Medina became this unique ecosystem of knowledge, a society so advanced in its legal and ethical framework that it was, simply put, in a league of its own. So, the big question is, how on earth did they do it?
Right. So after the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, passed away, the Islamic State was expanding at a staggering rate. But this kind of rapid growth creates a huge challenge. You've got new cultures, new economies, new questions popping up everywhere, and all of it could have easily pulled the civilization apart. If that expansion was going to be stable, it needed a strong, unified moral and legal compass. The question was urgent. How do you provide clear, principled answers for a massive, diverse empire from its very heart to its furthest borders?
The answer came from the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, and his vision was just bold and brilliant. He decided to make Madeenah, the city where the Prophet had lived and taught, the official intellectual heart of the state. It was going to become the crucible for Islamic law, kind of like the central processing unit for all legal and legislative thought. This was never going to be just a loose collection of scholars. This was going to be an institution. Now, a vision that big needs architects, right? It needs the absolute best minds alive to build it. And that is exactly what Umar did. He didn't just invite scholars, he actively went out and gathered the intellectual giants of the era, the companions of the Prophet, and concentrated all of their genius in one single place.
Just stop and think about this number for a second. 130. 130 of the most qualified legal minds, people who had learned directly from the source of the revelation, all living and working together in one city. I mean, the sheer density of knowledge was unbelievable. This was, without a doubt, the most powerful think tank on the planet. And even within this powerhouse, there was a core team. You could call them the first string. As you can see here, this included figures like Omar himself, Ali, and Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. These 7 were the most active, the most prolific legal minds around. They say the legal rulings, or fatwas, from any single one of them could fill an entire book. Their collective work became the very bedrock of Islamic law. So, okay, you've gathered the greatest minds in one place. But how do you turn all that raw intellectual power into a legacy that actually lasts? See, it wasn't just about who was there, but how they taught, how they debated, and how they cultivated that next generation. This deliberate method created a true culture of deep inquiry. This right here, this is the gold standard. Knowledge wasn't just a general thing. It was specialized, it was recognized, and it was respected. The Prophet himself had endorsed Zayd ibn Thabit as the #1 expert in one of the most complex areas of law. This created a culture where real mastery was the goal, and everybody knew exactly who to go to for the most authoritative answers. And this shows you the dynamic in Medina perfectly. On one hand, you had the established veterans like Zayd, whose authority was just unquestioned, but Umar was also actively scouting for and mentoring young talent. He saw this spark of genius in a young Abdullah ibn Abbas, who they nicknamed the young old man because his wisdom was just so far beyond his years, and he brought him right into the highest circles of consultation. I love this quote. It gives us such a vivid picture of the teaching style. This wasn't some dry, boring lecture. Umar would present a really complex problem, and in a room full of senior figures, he'd look at the young Ibn Abbas and challenge him. Dive, O diver. Go deep. Find the pearl of meaning that everyone else might have missed. He was actively pushing for critical thinking and intellectual courage. Now, here's the crucial point. All this incredible, concentrated knowledge, it was never meant to be locked away in some ivory tower. The entire goal was to illuminate the whole civilization. Medina was the heart, and its purpose was to pump that life-giving knowledge out to every single corner of the state. Think about it. The state's most valuable export wasn't gold or grain, it was wisdom. Umar put in place a formal policy of sending his top scholars on educational missions. As new territories like Syria and Iraq joined the state, he sent his best and brightest to set up schools and teach the people, making sure that the legal and ethical framework grew right alongside the borders. And this was no random assignment, let me tell you. It was a highly strategic deployment. If you look at this table, you can see how giants of knowledge like Abdullah ibn Masud were sent to found a school in Iraq. Meanwhile, another top-tier team, including the great Mu'adh ibn Jabal, was dispatched to Syria. But here's what's just as important. Look who stayed back in Madeenah. Senior figures like Ali and Zayd ibn Thabit. They remained at the center, keeping that intellectual engine running. It was a perfectly balanced system of centralization and distribution. The result of all this was that Madeenah became the undisputed reference point for everyone. If a tricky issue came up in Egypt or Persia, their local scholars wouldn't just debate it themselves. They would physically travel to Madeenah to consult with the masters. The Madeenan school wasn't just one opinion among many. It was the benchmark, the standard against which all other legal thinking was measured. So, what's the long-term takeaway from this incredible project? It's a foundation that proved to be so strong, so well-designed, that it would support a flourishing of knowledge for 1,000 years. It's a legacy written not just in stone, but in the very ink and insight of those scholars. You see, the scholars who were sent out went on to become the founders of new intellectual centers. The great legal schools that popped up in cities like Basra and Kufa in Iraq were basically franchises of the Madeenan model. They were built on the exact same methods and knowledge carried by the students from Umar's original school. The blueprint was so effective, it was just replicated right across the map. And all of this brings us to a really vital question for our own time. The story of Madeenah isn't just history. It's a case study in how to achieve excellence. It shows us that to create a lasting intellectual legacy, you need a clear vision. You need a concentration of talent, a culture of mentorship, and a deep commitment to spreading knowledge far and wide. So the question it leaves for us is, what can we learn from this 7th century blueprint to build the kinds of learning institutions that will stand the test of time today?